It's my absolute pleasure to be joined once again by Anna Danylchuk, who is well, I say the face of Ukraine. I think for many pro-Ukraine supporters in the West, she absolutely is the face of Ukrainian resilience, and of course, explaining the toxicity of Russia, its propaganda, and the history behind it as well. Anna, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again. Always happy to be with you and your community.
And quite a bit of time has passed. I think it's a good sort of 6 weeks or so since we did the last one. We've had summer, we've had a lot of weird stuff has happened in the interim, and you have diligently been producing videos daily, trying to explain the situation. I think we are more or less aligned on what's been going on, but we've had the summit in Alaska, we've had the summit in China. Um, and there's so many different angles on there. There's the angle of, Trump and his tacoing, but there's also Vladimir Putin, who the spin has been that he's got a lot out of it. Whereas looking at some of the sort of Z patriot community stuff, some of the messages coming out are really not quite so positive. Um, Many of them thought that Alaska was a betrayal of Russian interest, and there are voices saying that Russia has now been sold out to China, or maybe that happened a long time ago. So it's kind of it's quite a complex picture. What's your take on it?
Well, it's a complex picture, and it's a picture that highlights the irresponsibility of some sane political leaders because we are allowing for this to happen. Of course, it was very difficult for me to watch this meeting in Alaska as a Ukrainian, with the red carpet rolled in front of Vladimir Putin, and his meeting with Trump is just another diplomatic victory. After Trump started calling him, breaking the isolation, forgetting that other presidents, other prime ministers did not speak with Putin, not because he disagreed, but because they chose not to, after all the crimes committed by him. And Trump, with his diplomatic incompetence, broke that diplomatic isolation and actually helped Putin become influential again among his predator friends. Because when Putin traveled to China this September, he came as a victor. A couple of years ago, on a similar summit in Samarkand, he was treated differently because nobody wanted to speak with him in Europe, in the United States, and this also shadowed his image among the Asian leaders. And today, like these days, he came to China when Xi Jinping has really bad relations with Trump. He cannot communicate directly. And Putin is Trump's friend. So he gained more diplomatic political influence again in the context of constant Russian military and economic failures. So Putin and his team used Trump professionally. And unfortunately, Trump seems not to understand, not to see this constant mockery coming from the Kremlin, coming from China. And this undermines the strengths of the West that still is richer and stronger than China, North Korea, and Iran, but acts differently, allowing Trump to still, conduct and lead, which is very wrong, I believe.
And this is interesting here because I think a lot of people who are critical of Trump, including that's most of the people I know, tend not to give him, any kind of power or whatever. But it is quite clear that around the world he does have power and influence, even if he doesn't have respect. And in having that photo opportunity in Alaska with Putin, he has done a huge amount to normalize Putin's image and regime in the world at the same time that knowledge of the war crimes is just growing and growing, amongst experts at least. The documentation of what Russia's done it should make it an absolute pariah state around the world. It should be like a leper. No one wants to go near it, touch it. That it should be a contagious pariah of a state. But unfortunately, Putin, in his arrogance and smugness, seems to now feel that he's back on top, and in large part, it is that's being bestowed by Trump.
Yes, that's exactly what I think and what many people think. And it is very evil, it's very wrong, and it's super unprofessional because apart from, betraying a lot of people suffering in Ukraine, it's also a very bad signal that can lead to more troubles for countries around the world, like Taiwan, like the Philippines, and the United States, including because Donald Trump is the weakest American president ever, and in a very bad timing when Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un want to change this world structure, world order, and they are acting from the position of power. And all in context, when Ukraine is capable of defeating Russia. After the failed blitzkrieg, we not just survived, we brought war to Russia. Russia is a no-fly zone. Russia has serious gasoline crisis, had to ban the exports of gasoline, which was always important for their collapsing economy, overheated with war effort. With drones, not even long-range missiles, we destroyed 20% of their oil refining industry. Russia is losing. Russia is the weakest ever. And instead of finishing it once and forever and bringing lasting peace to Europe and the world, we get the weakest American president who constantly messes with everything, blames EU leaders, blames Ukraine for Putin's war crimes. And everybody sees that. And I'm not angry at Trump because, like, you're not angry at people who know nothing and who act like that. You just feel sorry for them. But I'm angry at those who see, who know the truth, and still play with this, still try to create comfortable atmosphere for Donald Trump to keep pretending that he's daddy of Europe or NATO when he's not. He's just the crazy uncle.
Before we move on to the next question, I'd like to make a personal recommendation that I know you will appreciate. You may have seen my interview last week with the producer of the film series Kyiv of Mine, Ronnie Apteker. Well, I've partnered with them to help raise awareness of what I believe is an important series of films made for a Western audience to help break through absurd stereotypes about Ukraine, some of which, of course, are amplified by Russian propaganda. You can watch these films for free now. Details in a second. Kyiv of Mine is a documentary series about Ukraine's extraordinary capital, which I had the privilege to visit for the first time in January this year. The film production began in 2018, and of course, much has changed since then. It's now 2025, and the story is far from over. Kyiv of Mine is a fast-paced, beautifully filmed, humorous, fun, insightful, heartbreaking, moving, and hopeful work. The very antithesis, in fact, of a doom-laden and worthy wartime documentary. This is a work that is extraordinarily uplifting. My friend Operator Starsky says the film is made with so much love. The film series will make you laugh and cry. It's the only film about Ukraine that began before the war yet has traced lives through the tumultuous times, and which follows the lives of more than a dozen Ukrainians in real time.
When people from other countries come here and say, you have a fun country, we say, oh, really? You think so?
Initially, you're afraid, but on the other hand, it, I need to live my life.
Are you optimistic about the future?
Yes, definitely.
This is an historic period told through highly personal and emotive stories from Kyiv's days of emerging prosperity after the Maidan Revolution through COVID and the full-scale invasion. This film is a breath of fresh air. Ukraine deserves a better conversation in the world, one that isn't centered around war, says Jolyon Ellis, filmmaker on Kyiv of Mine. It's hard not to argue with that, and the filmmakers have fully delivered on this promise. This is essential watching for anyone who calls themselves pro-Ukrainian, but I think it's also vital to get friends, colleagues, and family to watch it too, because the reality is few people have a vivid impression of Ukraine or any direct connection with its people. War is inhumane and abstract. Building an alternative perception is essential for engaging the world with the importance of Ukraine's struggle. It still feels, unfortunately, like the world is has priorities, and that the priority of preventing Russia from collapsing, imploding, that you and I know is the solution to the problem. Ultimately, Russia will not change until it ceases to become like an empire and ceases to act like an empire, until it ceases to have the resources to be an empire, and until the Russian people decide that they no longer want to be an empire. That is the only ultimate solution. But it seems that the world is intent on prolonging this anachronism, this vile imperial entity and mindset, prolonging it as long as possible because of fear and, I dare say, laziness as well, of having to deal with the consequences of its collapse. It seems that only people in the Baltics and Ukraine fundamentally understand that and are working to achieve that. Everybody else is on a different agenda. Yes, they might want to see Ukraine survive. Some might want to see it thrive, but none of them have wrapped their heads around this agenda to make Russia small again, and that it's not just a slogan, it's a strategic imperative.
You know, I am a bit more optimistic than you are. And I feel that more and more countries in Europe at least start thinking about this future. I have bad news for all of those who fear the dissolution of the Russian Federation because it's inevitable. It will happen. Whether Ukraine wins or loses, the process is unavoidable. It has already started. And such empires, they don't survive in the 21st century. So no matter what happens, I think during our lifetime, we will witness the dissolution of Russia. We cannot predict how exactly that will happen. And for our safety and security, it's always better to control this process, to plan this process, to predict this process, to analyze it, so that when it happens, and empires always collapse, like the process can be one of their decline, and then something triggers and the collapse happens really quickly. It won't happen for decades. It may happen in months, just as it was with the USSR. And we've met on Lviv Media Forum, Ukrainian intellectual Valery Pekar, who keeps reminding people that the dissolution of the Russian Empire actually has already happened during this century twice. First, when the classical Russian Empire collapsed, then the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the third stage is also inevitable. And with this a chaotic attitude of Trump, mildly speaking, a lot of Europeans understand that Russia is a real threat for them too, not just for Ukraine. Unfortunately, that is not a small territorial local conflict. They realize that there was time when part of Berlin was Russian. And Medvedev speaks about Russia to the Lisbon. So, looking at how the United States, our eternal ally, abandons really good partners, rich partners, smart partners, democratic partners, for the sake of these dictators' parties. And they realize that Russia will continue being a threat for them personally, not just for some Ukrainians. And I've heard that, at least on some internal diplomatic political conversations, they discuss that Russia is now totally dependent on China. Some even say that what we see is a war between Ukraine and Russia-China. Some may say that this war will end with Ukraine bordering China. Not meaning that we will take all of the Russian territory. We wouldn't need that many. But meaning that China will come and China actually owns Russia. They do it in a non-military way, not openly, but Russia is fully dependent on Chinese money, on Chinese weapon, on the Chinese permission to use North Korean soldiers because that's the testing ground for Xi, who receives all the information, all the intelligence data. And Trump or anyone else, even a smart and strong US president, cannot take away Russia from these hugs of China because they are historically, ideologically close. We've discussed that with you too, that it's not just about communism or some authoritarian traditions. It's about anti-Americanism. They are anti-American. They hate West, they hate Europe, they hate Trump. And they show it when meeting in China, when discussing the weakness of the rotting West, as they call it. And so more and more people understand that there is no way that Russia can avoid total dependence on China. And if you don't want it, and you can clearly see that this Middle Asian former republics of the USSR, they are now fully on the orbit of Beijing. They don't even consult with the Kremlin because they see Kremlin is losing geopolitical influence in Syria, in Azerbaijan, in Armenia, and they see this weakness, this dependence, and there's violence that Russia brings to the countries that it liberates or supports, and they tend to the orbit of Beijing. Well, maybe it's even culturally closer to them and it's safer, and China invades the world in a different way with less bloodshed. And so I've heard this from some smart people coming from the EU saying that it's inevitable that part of Russia will go to China. Our task is to back up the dissolution process and to safeguard that some countries that have potential to become democratic, that have potential not to be swallowed by China, remain in this like European orbit. But it's an inevitable process. This will happen. Trust me, I have witnessed the collapse of the USSR from a little child perspective, but many things resemble it. Exhausting war, economic problems, oil prices, now gasoline crisis and oil production crisis, something they didn't have. And even people that they are conscripting for war. They did it with Afghanistan. They were not conscripting people from, Moscow, St. Petersburg. They are again using the potential of peripheral republics, exhausting them. And many of these people at a certain moment of time will realize what's this reason to be with the Kremlin? They don't give us stability, they don't give us security. Drones are flying, explosions are burning. It's dangerous to work in Tatarstan on military factories like drone production factories. We are more in danger with the Kremlin than without the Kremlin. Plus, they are taking our people to the meat grinders. This is exactly what happened during Afghanistan war. People started to question, why do we need that? Because many are not politically active, ideologically active, culturally active, but they are in this alliance with the Kremlin because it offered them security and stability. And we don't see security and stability in Russia now.
And there's another aspect, which is the decline of infrastructure, the decline of industries, the decline of, I call it communities, but I don't think there's such a sense of community as we define it. But when you travel through the wreckage of the Soviet Union, you've begun to see the actual scale of the collapse. There are factory complexes that are miles long, abandoned and ruined and rotting in the tundra. So whenever we have these conversations, I have that sort of physical, visceral sense of what it means to be in a collapsed empire. And I can imagine it again, and I wish it. I wish it to accelerate. Well, we have to talk about Ukraine. We've far too much energy is always spent on Russia. And there's two things I wanted to bring up. One is the lovely pink-tipped flamingo missile. which is a thing of absolute beauty. It looks like a giant lipstick or something, which I think is gorgeous. And then there's the cardboard revolution, which we discussed as well. But first of all, what are your thoughts on the increasing capabilities of Ukraine in terms of long-range strike missile capabilities that seems to be only going in one direction, which is towards Ukraine being much stronger technologically and strategically? I did an episode where actually, this was a new idea, I think. He hadn't thought of it this way, but I had a conversation with Ben Hodges where we were discussing the idea that what we are now seeing is a kind of siege of Moscow, not a sort of traditional military siege, but actually a siege that is like sort of Judah or David or Goliath, where Ukraine is going to leverage the weaknesses of Russia's size against it by cutting off the arteries of resources, energy, logistics, and essentially starving the regime out in some way.
Jonathan, I did love this episode and the title of it, The Siege of Moscow, because it is. Uh, you know, I feel proud to be Ukrainian because sometimes in this world I feel that we are the only adults. And I'm also happy that we do not hide, that we do not speak or support nonsense. We sometimes have to say that, yes, negotiations with Russia, understanding that there is no background for that, but just not to lose the access to the US intelligence, at least for some time. But everyone in Ukraine understands the reality, like real reality, that we have to fight, that this war will not end in a month or two. And that the only way to end this war for long is to demilitarize Russia seriously. And that we are not striking hysterically, aggressively anywhere as they do. Because it's not a strategy what they do with drones every night in our cities. It's the terror. But they should have guessed Ukrainians are not like our reaction. People are different, nations are different. So our reaction is not the one they expect. That we will demand Zelensky, let's surrender. No, we're doing the contrary. We're saying, Zelensky, don't you ever go to Moscow. Don't you sign anything. And we keep donating and we keep investing in our military production because we learn from our mistakes. We learn from fake memorandums. We learn from the fear of our allies. And that returns us to this the only adult on the continent or something. And everyone in Ukraine, after we win, after the defeat of Russia, don't want to become, oh, let's give up all our army, let's give up all of our weapons. We discussed that we have to be very militarized. And so this is one part that makes me proud. We understand that with development of Ukrainian long-range missiles, we are more independent, same as with drones. We don't have to ask for a permission to use them. I'm grateful that many countries are involved in the development and production of these missiles and drones because it's not Ukraine doing it alone. But some big companies believe they need the skills that we have. I don't like to compare Ukraine with a testing ground, but it is. It is for China and Russia, and let it be for our allies. And we need it because that's the way to protect our innocent civilians sleeping during drone nights. And one more thing that makes me proud is that we understand the 21st century warfare. When Trump says Ukraine cannot win because Russia is large, he speaks in terms of the 20th century. Well, he is a little bit like, it's really difficult to find the job when you're 79. A job in trade, a job in production. Somehow he got the job as a president, but he still thinks in terms of 70s, 80s, maybe 90s, but not 2025, when this large size of Russia is its weakness. They don't have enough air defense. They cannot bring it where necessary. They only protect Putin's bunkers and the front lines. Because, come on, we changed even the strategy of strikes on oil refineries. Previously, we targeted one, then another, and now we erase, destroy regions of oil refining production. We did that with Rostov. We did that with the south of Russia in Samara. So one by one, we destroy facilities that are connected. And then we destroy this logistics railway connection. And they are cut off. That's the strategy. And when Ukrainian drones return 3, 4 times during the month to one and the same refining facility to destroy part by part its buildings, its structures, don't you think Russians know we will come? Don't you think they want to protect this object? But what? They failed. There is nothing they can do. Spiderweb operation exposed the danger that your nuclear weapons, your strategic cruise missile carriers can turn into your weakness with drones operating inside your country. And there is nothing you can do. And actually, a lot of air defense systems, they were developed for missiles of the Soviet era. So this modern war is very different from what many generals, what many presidents, what many NATO leaders still base their knowledge on. And Russian size, Russian corruption, Russian negligence, and Russian ego, the belief that they are strong and invincible, play against them. And we demonstrate that. And I feel very angry that no one is focusing on the destroyed oil refining facilities, on gasoline crisis inside Russia, on Russian recession and stagnation, on the destruction of their Black Sea fleet, on the spiderweb operation that exposed not just this weakness of Russia inability to protect, but also the failure of their intelligence services that were always described as the best on the planet. Come on, Ukraine, former Soviet Republic, you had so many spies in here, you had so many your people, and you failed to protect 1/3 of your aviation strategic. So come on, let's be realistic. Let's just not interfere in what we can do.
And what people also miss there, as you say, the absence of coverage of these positive, strong, and strategic stories is deeply shocking. But also then joining the dots between it. Well, why does Russia have, 1 million strong Sylvia Key and yet can't defend against not just Ukrainian attacks, but we also remember Crocus Hall? The answer is clear and simple. Not only are they, shot through with nepotism and corruption, this same kind of chauvinism and arrogance means that they don't want to learn. They don't want to critique and change and evolve and adapt. But the biggest story, of course, is that Russia is not a system built on external defense because they'd assumed they were invulnerable. No, their entire security apparatus is built on repression, is built on controlling their own people and controlling the resources for a small clique of the sort of mafia elite that run the country. It's an entirely parasitic and terror-driven system, but of course that makes it brittle, vulnerable, and really uneconomic and unintelligent, basically. It's not an intelligent and sophisticated system.
We have this beautiful illustration of what started the destruction of the Russian Federation now in the United States. When Donald Trump does something stupid, something that like his tariffs on off or some decisions, internal decisions, we have people like Marco Rubio saying that's a brilliant decision. That's just a fantastic approach. When for example, in a case of Ukraine, that he had totally different opinion. And he spoke very correctly about the need to stop Russia from the reconstruction of the USSR. So we may say he knows everything. He knows the truth. He sees the reality, but he chooses to lie to himself, to his people, for the sake of power he gets, or for the sake of influence, or I don't know, he's afraid of Trump. And he's one of hundreds or thousands that we see. Not all those people who glorify Trump actually glorify him. Okay, there are some dumb MAGA representatives who do believe, But there are so many smart people, experienced people, knowledgeable people that still play by these new, very Russian rules. Worship your leader no matter what he does or what he says. It's very disgusting to observe, and it tells a lot about the people who switch sides so quickly, but it also undermines the strengths of the United States because people pretend that everything is okay when it's not. When some problems are coming to your economy, to your healthcare system, people keep pretending that everything is fine. That is exactly what they did in Russia to satisfy Putin. They provided him with this kind of intelligence data that he wants to receive. And it is still under investigated. The reasons of the failed blitzkrieg. They did plan a blitzkrieg. The US thought this would be a blitzkrieg. The Germany thought this would be a blitzkrieg. Our best friends thought this would be a blitzkrieg, and Russia was confident. Their soldiers indeed brought these parade uniforms because they thought that would take them a week with a parade in Kyiv, people cheering. And many, actually, especially in this first pack of soldiers, believe that Ukrainians are waiting to be liberated. There are lots of evidence when they didn't know how to react and what to do when they saw that people in Russian-speaking regions did not want to be liberated by the Kremlin, when they opposed the soldiers. And there are conversations recorded when they say, "What is wrong with you? We thought," and so on. So this is a great evidence and demonstration nobody's talking about that they have a totally wrong picture of the world. They lie to their leaders, to Putin, and then down the hierarchy, creating a fake image of reality. It may work in some cases, but it doesn't work in all the cases. And that's the
There's
reason why.
another interesting little angle on that. I mean, this may not be the most important thing, but this is also, I think, the classic Muscovite attitude, which is with money you can buy everything. With money you can buy material wealth, you can buy culture, you can buy resources, you can buy an identity, everything can be bought. And I think that goes back to the origins of the Muscovite Empire. As you and I know, the Kremlin itself, which we think of quintessentially Russian, was bought and designed by Italian architects and overseen by foreign engineers. So there's this illusion that money can buy everything. And prior to the full-scale invasion, they tipped vast amounts of money at Ukrainian apparatchiks, at Ukrainian intelligence officers, who told them what they wanted to hear. They told them, yeah,
It was even
sure.
different. They had a lot, not just like paid Ukrainian, they had a
Yes.
lot of Russian.
They had a lot of Russians and Ukrainians and
The
people telling
Minister
them,
of
right,
Defense was
yeah,
Russian in
you're
times
you're
of
going to give me
Yanukovych.
a big pile of money, and this is the story you want to hear, and I'm going to tell it to you, and I'm going to pocket the money. When push came to shove and the invasion happened, none of those people, or very few of them, were there. They're like, well, thank you for the money. Right, we're done here. This deal is over, and good luck. Again, there's a certain kind of arrogance in the belief that your money can conquer everything, including people's minds and reality, and it can't.
Yeah. Plus, once again, these lies, they play a trick with them. They know they what they want to hear, they hear it, but the reality doesn't change. Of course, a lot of propaganda, a lot of BS influence our decisions, and that's why so many are still fearful of Russia. That's because of its fake image. But when you see that oil refinery is burning, when you see Moscow and St. Petersburg as a non-fly zone, when you see naval parades canceled, you realize that, well, not everything is as they describe it. So, by acting like that in the United States, pretending that, I don't know, uh, Kennedy Jr. is an expert in medicine, um, you won't succeed. At the set moment of time, it will give very bad consequences. It demands a certain amount of bravery to see the truth, to accept the truth, especially now when the world is burning. But you cannot survive by choosing this like approach that is seems safer, when it's not. And it will reach you. Like not wanting to read something bad won't save you from Russians sending drones to test your countries, for example.
And this is why I think the cardboard revolution, as it's called, is so important. Or the protests, not a full-fledged revolution, but the sort of what seemed to be relatively spontaneous protests. Um, I went back and I've just transcribed our first interview from 2022, I think it was. And you were trying to describe to me Ukrainian politics and society, and it's almost as if you'd written a script for the protests that happened. I'd call it almost prophetic. But it's extraordinarily important at this time, as you say, that Ukrainians are not prepared to accept a shoddy and shitty lie just for convenience. Even in times of war, it's like, no, this is reality, and we are going to protest reality, and we're going to hold our representatives, our leaders, to account. We're going to remind them that they're there because we put them there and for no other reason.
Yeah, thank you for reminding that. Thank you for transcribing that. Thank you for keeping the record. Uh, I would not name it a revolution at all because it was not. And I know that Ukraine is associated with revolutions, but once again, even our revolutions are not that revolutions as you saw in 1917 or something like that. It's more of Ukrainians getting back control of their country when they are dissatisfied with what is happening. These were protests, and they were beautiful, and they demonstrate a very Ukrainian approach. And it was so funny for me to read some comments of my foreign friends, saying that, oh, it must be staged. Maybe it's a coup against Zelensky. Maybe it's Putin. Maybe it's Trump, like very different versions. And they were genuinely worried that this can lead to some bloodshed, serious troubles when it's not the time. And as a Ukrainian, I was completely safe. I knew it's ours. It's Ukraine born. It's very natural. It's very typical. It won't lead to any big problems. And it was so funny. And it once again proved to me that even good people who care about Ukraine still do not fully understand the Ukrainian spirit, the Ukrainian history. As you have a very smart audience, I can give a small piece from our history. Everybody knows Cossacks. Cossacks existed for centuries in Ukraine. They had their state, they had their organization, and all the decisions in Cossack leadership were made on Maidan. That's why we call it Maidan. They elected hetmans, and these are leaders of military campaigns, Ottomans, scribas, financial ministers of the state on Maidan, where ordinary Cossacks voted. And a Cossack, the lowest ranking Cossack, could, organize a Maidan if he had an issue and he had people who supported him. So leaders had to go up. And it's a very Ukrainian thing when something happens, when you're dissatisfied, to go to the central square of your city. That's what we always do. That's why Maidan, Revolution of Dignity, Orange Revolution was not funded by someone. By the way, these rumors about CIA or someone else, Russia never uses inside Ukraine. They never use this kind of disinformation because they know Ukrainians won't buy it. We know it's us. That's how I act. That's what I will do without any foreign interference. We are way calmer, way patient in times of the big war because we know we need to preserve the legitimacy of our country. We don't want elections. We know it's impossible to conduct the free will of people under bombs and shelling, something all smart people understand. Because once again, with this cardboard protests, you've seen that if Ukrainians really wanted elections, we would go out on streets and speak about that. If we felt this is turning wrong, we would speak about that. If we didn't like these anti-corruption laws, there were some reasons. It was not to hide something existing. There is some logics, but in general, it was wrong. It was not what Ukrainians wanted. We knew it could slow down European integration, and we went out. And most importantly, all the things written on these cards, they were with some bad words. Many, by the way, Ukrainians were dissatisfied that our uses so many F words and bad words. Lots of discussions about that. But they were not political. They were not against like Zelensky go or someone Zaluzhny come. They were addressed to the problem we see. And the government reacted. And that's exactly how the democracy works. And there are a lot of cases that you don't know from outside when Zelensky and the government have an idea and they drop this idea in the media to check the reaction. And when they see the reaction is negative, they back down and they say, whoa, 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 we didn't want to do it. That was rumors. We know that was not. We know they were testing us. But that is good. That is healthy. That's how it works. Because maybe they know something and they believe it's a good decision and then they see people don't like it and they back down. They back down. That's how they serve the people, the servant of the people. In Ukraine, we never glorify our leaders. You will never see us worshiping anyone. We are more critical than others. That's why it's so vomiting, is there a word like that, for me to watch these meetings with Trump when it resembles the worst period of Soviet era.
Mm.
And they say, you are so glorious, you are the smartest, you are the most beautiful. Like
The best at everything. It resembles North Korea, in fact. It's
yeah, and Soviet
horrific.
Union, and it's just like not the way we live here. Zelensky, no, people can tell him everything, like, and it's more common for Ukrainians to criticize our leaders. It's later that we may say, well, he was not bad. But when he is a president, you are like more negative towards him because he's always not doing enough. He's always not saying enough. And it's a healthy attitude.
That's it. No czars, no czars, no kings.
Never.
That is the right way to go. And I mean, our own king has no real power over the democratic process. And again,
And he is polite. He is polite. He's not
I
acting
mean,
like,
I'm sure he
well,
has
I
his
don't know him.
moments
I
of
don't know him personally. I
impoliteness.
haven't met him. But I mean, the
Yeah.
vibe is not like, kiss my hand, I'm your king.
No, exactly. No, I'm sure he's mostly polite and dignified, I think. But no, I mean, you don't want that kind of capricious power. You don't want people to worship leaders. They need to know that they're going to be held to account, and they need to be constantly listening and being in tune with people. So it was fascinating watching that.
That's a dialogue. That's a
It's a
dialogue.
dialogue. And it's fascinating seeing the Western response because it means, for me at least, that we are becoming less used to the mechanics of democracy, the psychology and mindset of democracy. And that's a worry, even amongst pro-Ukraine supporters who showed they didn't
That's
quite understand.
That's why I honestly think, without an exaggeration, that, for example, Ukraine in the European Union is very good for the health of the European Union. It's just like some vitamins coming. So it can only strengthen the EU, not the country.
That's it. The little voice of reality, which I think the EU absolutely needs. Britain, I think, was fulfilling that role. We are, or before Brexit, we were a far more rationally led country rather than being led by sort of fantasies and delusions. Unfortunately, we need to recover that, and
It
Ukraine
will
is the
pass.
perfect place. It will pass. I hope it will pass. The madness will pass. Anna, thank you so much. I know you have to dash. It's been a huge, huge pleasure speaking once again. Now we're getting back into the rhythm. We'll do more of these again, and the world is speeding up as well. So there'll be no shortage of things to talk about. But thank you for everything you do, and thank you for coming back on the
Thank you
channel.
so much, Jonathan, for your friendship, and thank you so much for all the friendship and support that we feel from your community, from your country, and from all the sane people who see the truth and act as adults. Thank you.
A final word from our partners, the makers of Kyiv of Mine. All three films are now available to watch for free on YouTube. Please check out the links to the dedicated website, which tells you more about the film, its subjects, and the filmmakers. Also in the description is a link to the YouTube channel where you can watch the films now. Do let us know in the comments what you think of them and if they inspire you as much as they have inspired me.